Coming up on Access Tech Live.
Is Bridgerton spicier with audio description? Wrapping up Vision Health Month. And it's National Accessibility Week in Canada.
This is Access Tech Live with Stephen Scott and Mark Aflalo. The latest in tech and accessibility every week. Follow us now and get involved at Access Tech Live.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Access Tech Live. I am Stephen Scott, and with me by my side every week is Mark Aflalo. Mark Aflalo, it's been a while. How are you?
Better than that question, Steve. How was your vacation? 3 weeks. Now, I don't think that was approved by HR. I didn't want to say anything in the previous weeks. We managed to get through it, but it's not the same without you. How you doing?
Oh, that's nice. That's very nice of you. Yes, I had a wonderful time. I had a great time. We traveled from Canada across from Toronto through to Vancouver, onto Alaska as well. It was a proper holiday. That's what I like to call it.
Wait a second. You started in Toronto, went all the way to Alaska, and then you got on a cruise, right?
That's right, yeah. So all the way across. Okay. So we started off in Toronto, then we did the whole tour from. We actually went to Calgary, which is of course a place I know well because I was stationed there overnight. That sounds very fashionable to say that. Stationed there overnight because we were in, of course, Regina last couple of years ago for the town halls here on AMI.
Oh, that's true. But, that's a good point. When were you there?
So in my head. Yeah, that's right. So back in Calgary and then off to Banff, and we got onto the Rocky Mountaineer and went right along and across over to Vancouver, seeing some amazing sights in between, like standing on a glacier, having the opportunity to get onto the Maid of the Mist tour at Niagara Falls, dog sledding in Alaska as well. An amazing trip with my wife Marie. We had a great time, and I think she deserved the holiday more than I did, but we had a great time nonetheless. And I have to say, what a beautiful country Alaska is, and Canada as well.
Wait a second.
Well, of course.
Well, do you remember how to do this show? Do you remember what we're doing here?
Well, it's funny because our director Stacey said before we came on, she said, it's like riding a bike. I didn't have the heart to tell her I can't ride a bike, so I don't know what that means. But anyway, here we are. Let's get back into it. You ready? Shall we get back in? Shall we
I'm good to go. Yeah, I'm ready to go when you are.
Okay. Let's do it. We're coming up on the show today. It is, as you said off the top, National Accessibility Week in Canada. We're going to chat with the CEO of Accessibility Standards Canada today. Plus, May is Vision Health Month, and people are wondering how AI can play a role. You know, it plays a role in everything else. We're going to talk to a professor and a doctor all about this. But first, let's kick things off with the headlines.
We start in the UK, Stephen, on your side of the planet for a moment, because the automated vehicles bill was announced just last week during a recent speech from King Charles, marking a pretty big step towards the reality of driverless cars on UK roads. Now, this new legal framework enables the safe deployment of self-driving vehicles and establishes comprehensive laws for their operation. The government believes that the autonomous vehicles will reduce costs, injuries, and fatalities, positioning the UK as a world leader in this sector. Now, notably, the bill emphasizes safety, holding either the autonomous vehicle or the human driver accountable in the case of any accidents. By 2035, the UK market could reach a value of £42 billion, creating over 38,000 skilled jobs. The legislation paves the way for a transport revolution, moving driverless cars closer to reality, especially on that side of the planet. The Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses, which I know you used during your entire vacation, have received an update that make it easier to share to Instagram without relying on taking out your smartphone. You can now use the eyewear to share directly to a story simply by asking the voice assistant to either post a photo to Instagram if you want to take a new one, or share your last photo to Instagram by saying, share my last photo. Plus, the latest update gives you and the glasses access to Amazon Music, allowing you to play your tunes through the smart glasses open in your audio system. You can even control the audio using the touch controls or your voice if you want to. And finally, they've added access to the Calm app or Calm account if you have one. If you like listening to guided meditation or mindfulness exercises, all you have to say is, hey Meta, play the Daily Calm. Now, if you don't have a Calm account, they have a deal with Calm. You can get a 3-month subscription for free via the Meta View app. These features are gradually rolling out, so eventually you'll get access to them if you don't see them already in the app. Microsoft's gaming arm, Xbox, have released their Game Accessibility Workshop Toolkit. The Xbox Research Accessibility team has been hard at work creating this new resource to help make it easier for developers to make more accessible games for all players. The toolkit helps conduct workshops for game developers, giving them guidance on what to consider when they're setting up a game for accessibility. It features photo and video assets to conduct successful workshops, all with the hopes of getting more and more game studios to build accessibility into their games. Apple has allegedly signed a deal to bring OpenAI's ChatGPT-powered chatbot to iOS 18 when they unveil it in just about a week and a half or so on June 10th at their Worldwide Developers Conference. The deal is intended to give Apple some breathing room in the development of their own in-house AI models, which are not yet ready for prime time. Relying on OpenAI's technology will let them quickly bring generative AI to iOS and macOS. Apple's banking on the billions of users of iPhone and Mac computers to help them enter the race against competitors like Microsoft in the PC market space. Apple is apparently keen on also working with Google on Gemini, but their first choice has always been OpenAI. Either way, we'll know for sure on June 10th when WWDC kicks off in Apple's campus in Cupertino, California. And finally, Be My Eyes has launched an AI visual assistant on Windows. It's now available as a free download in the Microsoft Store. The tool uses OpenAI's GPT-4 with Vision model, allowing users to get detailed descriptions of everything that's on the screen. Here's CEO Mike Buckley talking about the features.
We started working on this 3 months ago, I guess, to prepare an app that would work in the Windows environment. And what it can do, some of the things it can do is it can describe your screen, right? So Be My AI can instantly describe what's on your screen within a window or other on-screen content. And this could be websites, applications, documents, providing accurate and detailed description. Secondly, it can also describe local images. Local meaning if you have pictures stored on your computer, right? So you can use Be My AI's image functionality and get, pretty clear and relatively concise descriptions of images that are stored, or graphics, right, that are stored on your computer. So it's a big deal. The other fun one is that it can also help you prepare for video calls. So it can assist you and tell you if you're centered in the frame or what your background looks like.
The Windows version of Be My AI is available now. Just head on over to the Windows Store on your PC. There you go, Stephen. That's what's in the news and the headlines this week. And I guess you're all eager to find out about a question of the day, aren't you? Or question of the week, rather. Sorry.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I live for question of the week. So tell me, please.
Okay, I can do that for you. If you could swap lives with a fictional AI robot or character for a day, who would it be and what would you do? I'll give you some time to think about that. I'll repeat the question here, okay? If you could swap lives with a fictional AI robot or character for a day, who would it be and what would you do? And of course, you can all get involved if you want. It's at Access Tech Live on all our social media platforms. You can also email us if you want. It's feedback@accesstechlive.com and you can get involved. Stephen, coming up, you abandoned us, but you're back. So we're going to catch you up on everything you missed while you're gone, plus still to come, Accessibility Standards Canada. And is Bridgerton spicier with audio description? Stick around. It's Access Tech Live.
There's more Access Tech Live to come. Get involved and have your say at Access Tech Live on social media. We'll be right back. Access Tech Live will return in less than 2 minutes. Access Tech Live is in a commercial break. Access Tech Live will return in less than 2 minutes. Access Tech Live is in a commercial break. The show will return in less than a minute. Access Tech Live will be back in 30 seconds. This is Access Tech Live.
Welcome back to Access Tech Live. I am Stephen Scott. Mark Aflalo with me today. And, Mark, just to prove to you this is a live show, I just had a text from a friend of mine who's just said, I can't believe you just referred to Alaska as a country. Yes, I do apologize. I realize it's a state. I misspoke slightly. Yes, you are absolutely right, person who shall remain nameless for now. Anyway, audio description, described video, what do we call it? Because, it was interesting. On my travels, Mark, I saw a lot of TV shows. Yes, I did watch a bit of TV in the hotel, where it was saying, this program is brought to you with described video. And then, over here in the UK, we call it audio description. So, audio description, described video, let's call the whole thing off. The most important thing is, it is a service that helps people like me watch television. It's essentially a secondary audio layer, which, gives me information of what's happening on screen when action is going on around that perhaps I wouldn't see. There's a voice actually giving me that information. Lots of people have experienced audio description by accident. In fact, if you Google audio description or described video, you'll often see people saying, how do I turn this off? There's people telling me what's going on screen and I don't want to know what's happening.
Yeah, well, Stephen, meanwhile, Netflix just posted a clip about a week ago or so from Bridgerton, and it actually highlighted audio description on that actual show. Now, here's the funny thing, is people who've never heard it or watched it actually say that the show takes on a whole new meaning and direction when they watched it with audio description. Let's take a listen and a watch of this clip here.
He leans in close, bringing his face to hers. They share a scorching kiss. He wraps his arm around her waist. They separate for a brief moment, then share several deep, slow kisses. She runs her hands up to his face and down his chest. They pause, regarding each other in wonder. She brushes her fingers over the curves of his ear and rakes her hand through his hair. His open mouth curves upward in an ardent smile. He presses his lips to hers, flattening her against the back of her seat. His hand slides up her skirt, coming to rest at her hip. She grips his lapel as they kiss fervently.
Wow, it's getting a little bit warm in here. I don't know about you. That's probably the only clip of Bridgerton we could play, from my understanding of this program. But it does show you the power of audio description, and almost it kind of takes the experience for a lot of people who don't use audio description every day, almost to that novel level. Almost like it's kind of like you're listening to a book alongside, and it's incredible how it's done.
I find it kind of interesting because in most cases, when they're producing these shows, they're not producing it with audio description in mind. So, what goes into the writing and the creation of the audio description, it's more than just describing it. You got to fit it in where it kind of fits in the dialogue and everything that goes on. Now, you actually caught up with Liz Gutman, who's one of the head writers at the International Design Center. Now, they're a company that does audio description for companies like Netflix and other broadcasters as well, which is incidentally where you could find Bridgerton, right? Now, here's Liz talking about the different ways that she approaches the writing to make sure that the audience is connected to the story.
The way you describe nudity in, for example, I don't know, a horror movie is going to be different than the way you describe nudity in a drama, is going to be different than the way you describe nudity in Bridgerton, which is meant to be steamy. Again, we're trying to bring the audio description experience as close to watching it as possible. So it's making sure that the describer, that you as a describer, as a description writer, let that feeling sort of wash over you, and then reach into your sort of bag of tricks to bring out whatever language and phrasing and tone will best suit that. And then moving forward in the process, in the booth, when the narrator is recording, to make sure that the director can adjust that a little bit too. Like, oh, could you, maybe it's bring it down a little bit, or bring it up a little bit, or it's it's a multi-step process that I always find really fun, even if it can be kind of embarrassing in the moment, to really get into that sort of romance novel, steamy description.
Yeah, I mean, it is incredible the work that people like Liz Gutman do to make the writing good and make it fit in with the show. And it's something I have to say that is a little bit unique about the International Digital Centre and the work they do. They really do pour their heart into making this the best script. Not only that, the best mix as well. It's something that I think they do really, really well, and it makes the experience of enjoying a show more than just a voice in your ear telling you what's going on. It actually works almost like a voice guiding you through the show, giving you that extra information as if it was meant to be there in the first place. And I think that is the trick that they bring to it. But it's absolutely fantastic. My wife loves the show, so yeah, she's very pleased. I less so.
Can you imagine what it's like to actually have to read that script also, like to watch it against the show? I can't imagine that's an easy thing to do. But I mean, that's why you use actors. It's not just people who read a script on the screen. It's you need people who can convey the emotion and get that across. Now, Stephen, while you were gone, we couldn't help but, joke about the fact that you maybe picked a pretty bad time to go in the tech world. I mean, you talk about the different things that happened. And I know, listen, we joke about it. I know it was a great vacation and it was a good time. So I figured instead of razzing on you like I've been doing this entire time, I came up with a fun way to kind of fill you in on the things you might have missed while you were on vacation. Let's roll that intro.
Okay. Top 5 things Stephen missed while on vacation.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do, Stephen. Okay. In absolutely no specific order of preference here, we're going to start with the top 5 things with number 5.
Number 5.
Okay, so let's start with Google. Google had their I/O Developers Conference. They announced a whole new AI-powered search plus new features soon to come, such as Google Ask with Video, which can see the world in real time, help along the way. There was Google Meet AI, which acts as like a note-taker and assistant in different meetings. And of course, they also announced their next generation AI model, which we have no idea when it's going to come out, but we'll see that soon. How about number 4? This is where we insert the intro. Number 4.
Oh, going well so far.
Number 4.
I'm too fast. That's a problem, Stephen, here. So, number 4, OpenAI. They actually hit the stage, Stephen, the day before Google. Timely, maybe? They announced ChatGPT 4.0. O stands for Omni. It's a new multimodal large language model. And if you want to know what multimodal is, that's voice, video, and text. And it'll be able to see things and react to things in real time. Really, really cool stuff coming out of OpenAI. Quite honestly, it excites me a little bit more than some of the other things that we're going to find out. But again, as we talked about at the top of this week's show, WWDC is coming up in like 9 days or something like that. You ready for number 3?
Go for it.
Okay, let's roll it.
Number 3.
Now, I'm sure you managed to catch up with this one while you were away, because I know that you were paying attention to some things. Be My Eyes showed off how they're going to actually use that new AI model from OpenAI with a very cool, amazing real-time audio description feature that's interactive and lets people navigate the world with complete independence. It was, I mean, the demo they showed was a gentleman actually in London hailing a cab, and it was able to see that the light was on the cab, so it was available to him. It was able to tell him when he should flag it down. And the funny thing is, right at the end of that video, I don't know if you saw this one yet, it says, "Oh, good job, you got the cab, and nice of your guide dog to lead the way." At no point in time did, and he tell ChatGPT that he was walking with a guide dog. It was so cool. And it was funny because at the Vision Health Conference I was at last week, which we're going to talk about a little bit later with our guest, someone demonstrated this, and they talked about this specific feature. And it was amazing to me how people in the crowd had no clue. It was amazing. The oohs and ahs of the crowd when they heard it in action was pretty insane. I'm sure you knew about this one, right?
And I did. I'd heard about it. I didn't actually see it till I came back, but I was very interested in this for obvious reasons. Just personally, I'm like, yes, please, I want this. But we did actually have Mike Buckley on Double Tap with us this week, and he was telling me, because I asked the question, look, is this something that's real? Is this actually, is this happening, or is this something you've made up as like a hope, as a promise of what's to come? And he said, no, that was Andy Lane, who's in that video from London. He was, just walking around recording that, and that is the result. So that's real. It's amazing.
That's amazing. And we're going to see, we spoke to him too last week, just talking about this event when right after it happened. And he said it's, they're waiting for the model to be in their hands officially, and then we're going to see this in hopefully a couple months. But he said don't hold them to it. So let's move on to number 2.
Number 2.
Number 2.
Oh, this is too much fun.
Wow.
Okay, so Microsoft, they announced their next generation of Windows with AI, and they're calling it Copilot Plus PCs. They also announced a new Surface laptop with the new Surface Pro 2-in-1. Tons of other PC manufacturers announced all their offerings at the same time. Alienware, Dell, Acer, Asus, etc., etc. Copilot Plus PCs are coming in June, which is just a couple days away. And by the way, next week, we're going to be talking to Jason Bromett at Microsoft all about the Copilot Plus PCs and everything that comes with the accessibility side of things, which is pretty cool. And I know you're just kind of waiting for, what is the one that you're going to get, right?
Well, I think, if I'm honest, the one I'm most interested in is the Surface Pro with the new detachable keyboard that comes in a new, larger font and bold typeset. Now, for me personally, that's maybe not the most useful thing, but for a lot of people out there who have low vision, in fact, to be honest, I even saw some reviews of people saying, yeah, it's good for low vision people. This could be good for anybody who's trying to see their keyboard at night. It could be amazing. So, an accessibility feature that's good for everyone. Yeah, but I have to say, it is, of course, the innards of the machine that we're more interested in. How is this going to work? Is it a MacBook Air killer, as they keep suggesting it is? Time will tell.
I think it's a MacBook Air killer until about 9 days from now when we find out what's coming out of the Worldwide Developers
Yes, that's right.
Conference. Yeah, which is kind of fun. Okay, let's go to number 1, which I think you could probably figure out.
Number 1.
Try to give a voice guide direction on how to make imaging very, very sarcastic. And we did a good job, I think. Apple announced the new iPad, Stephen, and the new iPad Pro featuring the brand new M4 chip designed to power AI, which they haven't actually unveiled yet in terms of computers. It's a thinner iPad Pro with a dual-layered OLED screen, a new iPad Pro on the 1 terabyte model and above with nano-textured glass. Let me guess, you might have heard about this one in your journeys, I think.
Yeah, well, I heard about this. I've got to say, I mean, what I did hear about was the controversy around the advert which came with it, where they had this, all the sort of guitars and pianos and cameras all being squashed down into this tiny, thin little iPad. I mean, I will admit it's a very thin iPad, but lots of controversy around the ad itself. I'll be honest, I was more interested in this, and I've actually got it here in my hand. It's the 13-inch M2 Mac, what is this called? The iPad Air. I was going to call it the MacBook Air. It's the iPad Air. And this is very interesting. It's 13-inch. I actually got this because, we've been on holiday and, we've played some of our holiday picks here on the show because, of course, you have to bring in your holiday picks. But, for being able to watch them back for us, big 13-inch screen, I think this could be really, really interesting. So, we'll see how it goes and also see how it performs because, iPadOS is evolving. I don't think it's evolving fast enough. I think someone like you, who, you do a lot of work on the road, I think you would love something like an iPad Pro with all the capability of macOS built into that with the touchscreen and all. It's not there yet. It's just not there yet. That's the problem with this. You've got this amazing hardware, but it seems to be limited. So, I don't know. Again, time will tell on this. Maybe in 9 days' time when we hear about the new, amazing features coming in iPadOS, then we might get a sense of what's coming. But, it seems to me it's got a huge amount of power, but not a great amount of capability. So
No, we'll find out. I'm sure something will come. So that's it. That's the top 5 things I think you missed. There's probably some more in there, and we'll get to them later on in the show and stuff like that. But my pleasure. It's a good summary. You can watch it back time and time again if you want to head on over to our YouTube channel or check on AMI Plus. It'll be there. Coming up, it's National Accessibility Week in Canada as we celebrate 5 years since the introduction of the Accessible Canada Act. So where do we stand in the mission to realize a barrier-free Canada by 2040? Philip Rizcallah is the CEO of Accessibility Standards Canada, and he's joining us next here on Access Tech Live.
Live to come. Get involved and have your say at Access Tech Live on social media. We'll be right back. Access Tech Live will return in less than 2 minutes. Access Tech Live is in a commercial break. Access Tech Live will return in less than 2 minutes. Access Tech Live is in a commercial break. The show will return in less than a minute. Access Tech Live will be back in 30 seconds. Now, back to Access Tech Live.
Now back on the show, and 5 years ago it was the Accessible Canada Act that was introduced with the goal of realising a barrier-free Canada by 2040.
Yeah, and this week, it's National Accessibility Week, Stephen, and joining us now to update us on where we stand is the CEO of Accessibility Standards Canada, Philip Rizcallah. Thank you for being here. We last caught up with you in Vienna. We're nice to have you back on the show, especially this week. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Mark and Steve.
Philip, first off, tell us about Accessibility Week and the significance it has in Canada.
So this is a National Accessibility Week. The significance is actually quite high. It brings together community groups. It brings together governments to talk about all the projects, all the initiatives that have been underway for the last year towards the goal of a barrier-free Canada by 2040. The name itself, Forward Together, it says it all. I mean, here, what we're implying here is that we have to continue to move forward. The emphasis is that we have collective efforts to move forward to try to achieve a barrier-free Canada. And when we talk about together, it's everybody, whether it's community or persons with disabilities, governments, including municipal, provincial, federal, it's industry groups, it's academia, it's a general public. All these groups have a vested interest in the removal of barriers to accessibility.
Yeah, no, it's a group effort, right, Philip? But we have to all get involved and all do our part to make sure that we hit that goal. What kind of companies and work are being recognized this week?
So we're recognizing a lot of the communities. We work with a lot of the communities that represent persons with disabilities. They're being recognized for the great work they're doing. We're also working with multiple industry groups, whether it's the airline industry, the banking sector, and other groups that are committed to working with us to kind of remove barriers within their industry. And we're also working with academia. So we work with them to help us develop or carry out research that will hopefully be used to remove those barriers to accessibility, or hopefully be used to create new policies for the government or help inform the development of our standards.
It's always interesting, Philip, from my point of view as a disabled person, hearing people talk about barrier-free, it sounds great, and I love it, and of course I am 100% behind this. Why wouldn't I be? But, sometimes it can feel a little bit empty, because the reality for a lot of us is we've been hearing this. I've been hearing it for 40 years of my life, that, things will improve, things will change. And it feels like we do get a very small amount of change over a long period of time. How realistic is it to say that, Canada can be barrier-free by 2040?
I think it's very realistic. The government, in introducing the Accessible Canada Act, looked at it in kind of a holistic approach. So they created our organization, which is Accessibility Standards Canada, and we're responsible for developing the standards that will hopefully be turned into legislation or help create policy. These standards are basically creating equity-based requirements. Equity in the sense that it's looking at a much broader base or a much broader group of Canadians, including persons with disabilities, and coming up with solutions for everyone. So the solutions is one piece of it, but they've also created two other entities. One of them being the commissionaire, which is kind of the enforcement overseer of the provisions that are going to be going into legislation. And we also have an accessibility officer that goes around the country and talks to various groups, whether it's industry groups or whether it's communities of persons with disabilities, and gets a pulse for what's working and what's not working. So I think the fact that we have these three entities working together in this process, it gives me a lot of confidence that we are going to meet our target by 2040.
I mean, can you give us some examples of sort of direct change that you would expect? I mean, it's great talking about the research, and of course that's all important, and moving the needle is sometimes just enough. But, what examples can you give of real sort of practical change that could be made here?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're working on a number of standards in areas of employment, built environment, communication, plain language, transportation, and a number of different areas, procurement. And I think if we just maybe take an example of built environment. So when I talk about built environment, it's the buildings that you enter to either go into a restaurant or go to work or to go to an event, a movie theater, to go to your event. What we're looking at is we're taking the way codes are developed today, which are based on what we call minimum acceptable standards. And we're turning that upside down. We're saying we now no longer can just design for the mass. We can no longer design for the 75 percentile of the population. We're looking to expand that so that we're actually trying to capture 95, 96+% of the population. And in doing so, coming up with solutions for that larger base of the population, we will address the needs of many people with disabilities. So a really great example would be if you have a 3-story building, current codes would not require you to have an elevator in that building. So if somebody wants to go to that building and go to the 3rd floor, whether it's for an interview or whether it's to see a doctor on the 3rd floor, they would be restricted, especially if there was somebody that had mobility challenges and were in a wheelchair, for example. What we're looking at is saying if you have a building that's 3 stories, everybody should be able to access every aspect of that building. You shouldn't be restricted from accessing all parts of that building like everyone else. So we'd be looking at solutions that would require you to have maybe elevators in that building or other provisions that allow you to reach all areas of the building. So this is a different mindset. Rather than designing for one group, you're designing for everyone.
Philip, when you started this job, even if I think back 5 years, I can imagine the stories and the challenges you might have had, or even the pushback from some companies when you're trying to talk to them about this. Have we gotten past that? Are we at a point where people are now embracing the conversations and actually taking action to make this possible?
So I think there's been a definite shift in mindset over the last 5 years. From when I first started, we were trying to educate people why we're doing this. It's not a nice to do. It's a requirement. It's a human right. So I think we're beyond that. I think most groups, most large organizations, most governments, whether it's provincial, municipal, federal, and also some of the industries that fall under our legislation, they see it. They understand why we're doing this. Now, that's not to say that they're going to get it right away, because there's still a learning curve. There's still an adaptation of what we're introducing, because it does change the way you introduce, and it does change the way you create policies within your organizations. But we're seeing a real positive momentum. We have been over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I'm really heartened by what you're talking about, Philip, because, first off, I think that there's 2 things here that need to go side by side, and you're talking about this. One, in a sense, is regulation, bringing in regulations and some kind of rules, almost a little bit of a nudge towards, getting it right. We can rely as much as we want on goodwill, but we have to sometimes push where, some companies, as you know, will not comply, and there's just no way around it, and it almost has to fall to legislation. But with that legislation has to come guidance. And that sounds like something you're building into this as well. It's not just about saying you must do something. It's here's what you can do.
Yeah, Steve, we're actually going a little further. We're telling you this is what you must do to address a specific obstacle or a barrier to accessibility. This is how you have to do it. And then we're giving you tools to kind of understand how to put in the features to achieve that. It's one thing just to give somebody a regulation, say, here it is, this is what we need you to build, and you need to build this in your building. The interpretation around that could be quite varied, depending on where you are and how somebody interprets that provision. So we're providing the tools, we're providing the education, we're communicating with those groups so that it is very, very clear what the intent is behind those provisions that we're creating. So it can't just happen by creating legislation. We're going to be piloting, we're going to be trialing some of these new solutions that we've created. And if we have to tweak, we'll tweak them before we come out with the actual legislation.
Philip, what about the cost? Is the government putting some money behind it to help, communities? I can think of some of the smaller communities that may not have the money and the financing to be able to adapt buildings or actually make changes. Is there any commitment on that side of things?
So I'm not aware of, I'm sure there will be some commitments depending on where you are in the country. Various municipalities, various provincial governments may introduce some sort of incentive. But from our perspective, What we're creating is the solutions, and we're creating options so that you can actually determine what would it cost me to do this? What will it cost me to do this? So you can make informed decisions based on the budgets that you have. So we're going as far as we can because we don't have a program that will provide costs for somebody to upgrade their building or change their employment policies. But we will provide you enough tools so that you can make sound decisions based on where you are and the size of your organization.
And there are some countries around the world that are forcing web accessibility as well. Is that something you're looking into as part of this? You mentioned built environment, but what about online? Yeah. What about access to the internet, access to apps, all that?
Absolutely, Steve. So the first standard that we're making a recommendation on is the ICT standard, Information Communication Technology Standard, which deals with WCAG. It deals with a number of the items that you just mentioned right now. So that standard, we're hoping to make a recommendation to the minister within the next few months. So it'll be the first standard coming out, and that will kind of covetail what's been happening in Europe and in the US. We've taken a standard that's referenced by several dozen countries right now. We've tailored it so that it will work in Canada, and that's a recommendation we're going to be making. So it will be very, very consistent approach across several countries.
Philip, what can we do to make sure that the general population, the general public, is aware of everything that's going on and share that message? Obviously, conversations like this are great, but I noticed, as I mentioned earlier on in the show, I was at Vision Health conference last week, and people were demonstrating some pretty cool tech that us in this space, we knew all about it. But I realized that the audience and just the general public, if they're not tuned into it, they just don't even know some of this stuff is going on.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer because there's so much going on, and there's only the community itself is being bombarded constantly. This is coming out. We'd like your input on this. We'd like to consult you on this, and there's just so much coming at them, whether it's from industry or whether it's from various levels of government, that sometimes it's overload. From our perspective, what I could recommend is that if you have a genuine interest in a specific area, whether that's communication, whether that's information communication technology, employment, that you sign up for our website, first of all, and then we can send you information of what's happening. And then you can look through that very, very quickly and decide, well, you know what, I'm not interested in this, I'm not interested in this, but I really like to know what they're doing when it comes to WCAG. I really like to know what they're doing when it comes to allowing persons with disabilities to become employed. So you can kind of focus in on those areas. Outside of that, I would say follow us, follow all the initiatives that are going on across the country. We have about 16, 17 standards under development. We don't expect everybody to be experts in following every one of those standards. We have about 85 research projects underway, but there's definitely going to be some gems in there that somebody will benefit from.
Philip, it sounds amazing. I can only imagine it feels like pushing water up a hill sometimes, but you're doing an amazing job, and we've got to start somewhere. What's the website you're talking about there? How can people find out more?
So go to Accessibility Standards Canada. Just Google that, Accessibility Standards Canada, and then you'll get into that. You'll get into our government site. It's the Center of Expertise, and it's very, very intuitive once you're in there. It's a couple clicks, and you get to just about any piece of information you want.
Love what you're doing. Good luck with it. Philip Rizcallah, the CEO at Accessibility Standards Canada, which you can search for online to find out more. Thank you for coming on, Philip.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks, Mark.
When we return, May is Vision Health Month, and we're going to speak to a professor and a doctor who's been exploring AI's role in vision and accessibility. Stick around, it's Access Tech Live.
There's more Access Tech Live to come. Get involved and have your say at Access Tech Live on social media. We'll be right back. Access Tech Live will return in less than 2 minutes. Access Tech Live is in a commercial break. Access Tech Live will return in less than 2 minutes. Access Tech Live is in a commercial break. The show will return in less than a minute. Access Tech Live will be back in 30 seconds. Back to Access Tech Live.
And we're back on Access Tech Live. Stephen Scott and Mark Aflalo with you here. Now, May is Vision Health Month. And Mark, you were at the Canadian Council for the Blind's Vision Health Month conference in Ottawa this week, right?
I was, and it was really interesting, Stephen. A lot of fascinating presenters like Jutta Treviranus. She's a director and professor at the Inclusive Design Research Center, and she's joining us now. Welcome to the show, Jutta.
Thank you, both Mark and Stephen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, Jutta. Tell us, how did you first become interested and involved in AI, and more specifically, advancing accessibility with it?
Well, my first foray into AI was actually in the 80s, so quite a number of decades ago, and I was working with children who relied on augmentative and alternative communication because their speech was not understandable. And I used AI to recognize their repeatable utterances so that they could communicate and control things with their voice, even though people didn't generally understand what they were saying.
That's super interesting, especially because when people say the word AI, they don't really think about going that far back. But we all know, especially in the tech space, that AI has been used in many, many cases. In that period of time, since the 80s is in my mind a long time ago, what are the most significant changes that you've seen in the technology, other than obviously it becoming a little bit more commercial?
Well, AI is basically still a statistical reasoning machine. It's like a power tool that does statistics on steroids, I guess. And the changes are how much data we feed AI and how much power we give the machine, both in terms of the resources that are there and the control that we hand over to the machine.
Now, in your presentation at the Vision Health Month conference, you mentioned 3 generations of AI. So let's maybe talk through this in a bit more detail. How has each generation, and I also just want to say at this point, guys, the 80s wasn't that far away. I'm starting to feel very old today. But anyway, each generation, how has it changed? How has it improved? How has it impacted on people with disabilities?
Yeah, so I do characterize AI as being in 3 generations, and it's an oversimplification, but I want to emphasize that we people are shaping AI. And in the first generation, we said, here are the rules, follow them literally and accurately. And from that, you get all these funny stories about robots and AI doing things very literally and therefore not actually the way we intended. In the second generation, we said, here's selected available data, use statistical reasoning to optimize towards these metrics or these measures and values that we want. And that's a very pervasively deployed form of AI. It's actually making a huge number of critical decisions about our lives and that affect our lives. It's in almost every form of decision-making that we have. And then people became aware of AI with the much hyped third generation. And there what we said is, here's all the data we have, you figure it out, and make new connections and determine weights based on past relationships and possible combinations. And we've also said, make it believable, make it feel like it is coming from a human. But that actually doesn't mean that it will be truthful, because the AI doesn't know what is truth or what is not truth. It's basically continuing that statistical reasoning and say, here in my data, this is the next predictable statistical answer or outcome. And statistical reasoning, unfortunately, as a means of making decisions does harm. Assuming it does harm to the outliers, and assuming what we know about the majority applies to the minority does harm. And my greatest concern is when AI is specifically used to find, match, sort, label, measure, optimize, calculate, and analyze people at scale.
Yeah, and that brings me to, something you brought up in your conversation, the Vision Health Month at the conference. You talked about the vulnerability of people with disabilities to those errors and to those things in AI. Have you seen incidents where AI systems have failed to meet the needs of people with disabilities?
Oh, definitely. And one of the things to understand about people with disabilities is people with disabilities are different from average. And that means, one illustration I use to talk about the implications of that is what I call a human starburst, where the statistical center is occupied by the majority of people, but at the outer edges of the data distribution are people with disabilities. And so in everything we design, the design tends to work if you're in that central average, but it becomes difficult to use or impossible to use as you move away from the statistical mean or the center of that starburst. And the same thing happens with AI. Everything it determines is highly accurate for the middle, but as you move away from the middle, it becomes inaccurate and then wrong. And so I've been experiencing, or I've sort of labeled this last decade as my I told you so decade, unfortunately. We've been monitoring harm and incident databases, and we find parents with disabilities falsely flagged as unfit, false positive tax audits, false positive security flagging, disabled applicants excluded at a much greater rate from filtering in employment and competitive academic admissions, biased credit and asset rating, unfairly denied mortgages and loans, unfairly high insurance rates, deprioritization of relevant information in our media and in any of the information that is made available publicly, and even iatrogenic death and illness. And that means death and illness from the treatment, not from the disease, because AI is used to choose the treatment that works for the average patient. AI is basically amplifying a lot of the discrimination that's happening in the past. And as AI gets more accurate, consistent, and efficient, it is becoming more consistently, efficiently discriminatory. And as long as it's using statistical reasoning, because people with disabilities tend to be different from the statistical mean or the average, it is biased against those individuals that are outliers. And so it, unfortunately, both for people with disabilities, but for the population as a whole, it's a form of almost digital eugenics. It's removing in our speech, in the things we produce, in the way that we hire, in the way that we educate, in all of those things, it's getting rid of that diversity and moving towards this notion or the statistical average and creating a monoculture. It's homogenizing everything we're doing.
I mean, this is incredible to hear what you're talking about. I mean, I think this is probably the first time I've heard this be talked about in a public forum in this way. I think this is fascinating, and clearly that talk has resonated with many people. I want to ask you just one question, though, about the vulnerability side on a personal level, because there are many people out there who are disabled who are lonely, simply lonely, and they see AI as a companion, potentially. Is there a danger there?
It all depends how we use it. I think what we need to question when we use AI, for whatever reason, is why are we using AI, and we need to understand how it is coming up with the statements, the production. So AI as a potential companion, we need to understand what it has learned. And so AI offers extreme benefits to people with disabilities. It is an amazing translation machine, and it can be very life-changing. But even there, if you are unlike the pool of people it's made for, then you are least likely to benefit from it. And AI also, we have to understand that it isn't actually human, that it's designed to become believable, but it is frequently hallucinating. And when we look at the content that AI produces, think about the polluted pool of information about people with disabilities that comes from. I mean, think about all of the information on the web or within the public domain about people with disabilities. It tends to be ableist slurs, jokes, characterization of people with disabilities as pitiable or suffering, etc., all of those fairly horrible tropes, but also, or it is inspiration, or what we call inspiration porn, excuse the term, where we are giving this very unrealistic picture about people with disabilities. So that will be the basis of what the companion that you're choosing is basing its responses from. We need to be very careful that in its application.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, this is an example of a time where I wish our show was 2 hours, because I'd love to talk to you for another hour about this topic. But thank you for joining us. We're going to post a link on our social media where people can follow you, and we'll definitely have you on another show to continue this conversation. Coming up, if you could swap lives with a fictional AI robot or character for a day, who would it be and what would you do? The answers to that question after a quick break here on Access Tech Live.
There's more Access Tech Live to come. Get involved and have your say at Access Tech Live on social media. We'll be right back. Access Tech Live will return in less than 2 minutes. Access Tech Live is in a commercial break. Access Tech Live will return in less than 2 minutes. Access Tech Live is in a commercial break. The show will return in less than a minute. Access Tech Live will be back in 30 seconds. This is Access Tech Live.
Now, if you could swap lives with a fictional AI robot or character for a day, who would it be and what would you do? I bet I'm interested to know the answers here, Mark.
Yeah, Tony wrote us at Access Tech Live on social media. He said, I'd probably want to swap places with someone from Star Trek. The idea of exploring new galaxies would be amazing. Second choice is easy. Inspector Gadget, LOL. That way, if a part breaks, they can fix it. You know, I wish I would have thought of that one myself. That would have been amazing.
Yeah.
Ryan reached out in a YouTube chat. He goes, Astro Boy. I'd fly around and save the day, maybe buy some decent clothes at the same time. I love that. Johnny writes, Bender from Futurama. What can I say? I have a crude sense of humor and a fondness for mischief, so I'd probably get into a lot of trouble. But, you know what? I never got into Futurama like I should. I was more of a Simpsons guy at that time. Michelle wrote, Wall-E. I'd clean up garbage and try to change the fate of the Earth.
Oh, okay. It's one of my favorite Disney films.
Really? I've never seen Wall-E. Yeah. I've seen the
amazing
character Wall-E, but I've never actually watched that movie, which is good. Stephen, welcome back. Thank you for being back.
Thank you.
Thank you for actually coming back on the show. I appreciate it.
I think I was never coming back. I think I was off with. I have to say, at some point with the Huskies and the sledding, I wasn't sure if I was ever going to survive that. So yeah, but no, thankfully I am back, and thank you to everyone for the support. And yeah, it's been a great time, but it is great to be back on Access Tech Live with you, Mark.
So if I had to pick, or you had to pick a most favorite part of your vacation or place on your vacation, not that you're showing favorites to any part of the country, what would it be?
I think I had a great time in Banff. I loved Banff.
Okay. That's one of those places.
And Toronto,
Banff,
brilliant city.
Yeah. Banff is one of those places I wanted to go to, but I've never actually had a chance to. So, hey, if you're listening somewhere out there, will you hire me to go to Banff? I want to go out for a reason. Just, I don't ski, so I think that's kind of the problem there.
Yeah,
it's a good time. Great conversations this week on the show. What, pardon?
Just roast marshmallows. That's all we did.
Well, I can do that in my backyard. But thank you to everybody who came on the show this week. Philip Rizcallah from Accessibility Standards Canada. Very cool stuff there. It's accessible.canada.com, by the way, if you want to check out him. And Jutta Treviranus, I mean, that conversation could have gone on for hours. So thank you to her for joining us. It was a great time. Stephen, thank you again for coming back. We're kind of down to the last couple seconds here. So on behalf of everybody on this week's show, thank you so much for being with us. Don't forget to connect on all our social media. It's at Access Tech Live, and our email address, please, feedback@accesstechlive.com. You can let us know about this week's question, and of course we'll post a new one next week as well. Thank you all for being with us on this week's edition of Access Tech Live. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Access Tech Live. Follow us online on all social media at Access Tech Live. Email us feedback@accesstechlive.com. Hosted by Stephen Scott in Glasgow and Mark Aflalo in Montreal. Live show director, Anastasia Spalding-Stenhouse. Technical director, Caitlin Robinson. Audio, Jordan Mulgrave. Live graphics and playback, James Kennedy. Graphics coordinator, Eliza Rocco. Integrated described video specialist, M. Williams. Supervising producer, Michelle Dudas. Produced in collaboration with Aflalo Communications Inc. and Double Tap Productions. Copyright 2024, Accessible Media Inc.
An AMI original production.